Hola a todas y a todos. Es para mí un verdadero placer presentaros al profesor David Knutson de la Universidad de Xavier University, Cincinnati, Ohio, que hoy nos va a hablar sobre un tema que esperamos que os interese y también que pensamos que va a ser muy enriquecedor para todas y para todos. El tema de su charla va a ser Mujeres y crimen en la obra de Susana Martín Gijón. Él es hispanista. ¿Cuántos años llevas, David, investigando sobre literatura española?
Más de 25 años.
Más de 25 años. Bueno, pues con esta presentación, mini presentación, yo voy a pedir a David ya que tome la palabra y que os hable sobre la obra de esta escritora española, Susana Martín Gijón. La conferencia la va a dar en inglés, pero después hará una pequeña aproximación a todos los puntos más importantes en español. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nieves. I thank you all for joining us. It's a pleasure for me to visit the Universidad Jaume I. Castellón isn't one of the best known places in Spain, but I have good friends here, good contacts, and it's a real pleasure to join you and collaborate with your programs. And I hope that you all find this presentation useful. I'm going to talk today about a particular crime fiction writer from Spain, but as part of the talk, I'd like to point out three different aspects of Susana Martín Gijón's work that aren't limited just to her, but rather to certain aspects of crime fiction in general and in Spain. To begin, I don't have to talk about peripheries in literature, tendencies, people, topics that have always been traditionally been considered out of the mainstream, on the edge or marginalized. We have a long tradition of patriarchy. We have a long tradition of exclusion, preferences for more masculine structures and tendencies. This isn't the place to talk about that long, sad history of exclusion and injustice. And I'll simply point out that the notion of having more and more diverse groups of authors, both men and women of all kinds of social classes, ethnic groups, men and women, all different identities, I think makes a much more rich and powerful set of examples for us to look at and to analyze as researchers. My specialty is not women's literature, although I do study a lot of authors who are women, and that's certainly significant in a traditional culture and in a profession that for centuries was dominated by men. So that's one of the new wrinkles, one of the new peripheries that's becoming more centered and more just more practical and more allowable today. When I talk about peripheries and marginalized literature, also crime fiction is another one of those popular genre fictions that for years and years and years was not considered serious. It wasn't considered a topic worthy of academic study and scholarship. When I was writing my doctoral dissertation in the early 1990s, I chose the Spanish novelist Eduardo Mendoza, and I had to defend that choice with several professors who thought that Mendoza was too popular of a writer, who he wasn't serious enough. That was end of 80s into the 90s. I think we're beyond that. Scholars today have accepted the fact that popular genre fictions can be subjects for serious academic scholarship. I've been able to win that argument. crime fiction also has become a useful tool today as a scholar, as a Hispanist interested in contemporary Spanish, contemporary culture in Spain and elsewhere. Crime fiction has become a vehicle that reflects a great deal of current events, social structures, problems and analysis of problems in those texts, in those cultural productions, whether it's film, whether it's novel, or any other format, even graphic novels these days. So for me as a Hispanist, crime fiction is a very, very lively and a lively object that will reflect and focus on a lot of topics that interest me. Finally, I've focused in my recent studies, I focused on crime fiction from rural settings. If you know something about traditional detective novels, they always have taken place in the city. Raymond Chandler wrote about the mean streets that a detective has to follow. We have these images of film noir and detective novels from the 1920s, 1930s in the United States, where a detective is wearing an overcoat, a hat, he's walking down the alley, it's rainy and foggy, these dark shadows. Well, that's part of the iconography of crime fiction, and for a long time, scholars considered only cities as a reasonable setting for crime fiction. Today, there are crimes all over the world and in rural settings, and one of the spaces that I've been able to open up in my scholarship is identifying and sort of celebrating, noting that crime fiction does not have to be set in an urban place, and that there's plenty of bad stuff happening in rural areas as well. So those are the three major topics that I'm going to be talking about today. And just to underscore it a little bit more, I'd like to share this image of a pulp fiction novel from the 1950s. I don't know much about this book, other than the fact that it has this very graphic, this very violent cover. And I think it connects with what I was talking about, the iconography and the images consistent with crime fiction in the 50s and the 60s until these days. You have a very heroic man who's fighting, who's saving a woman, and you see the woman is victimized. She's very submissive. She's tied up, but also very sexual. She's an object for men to look at and to save and then do whatever else. The notion that women writers and women characters are becoming more protagonists in crime fiction is another part of this this overall work where we are starting to place various levels of engagement, levels of difference, levels of newness, and also rural crime fiction by women writers in Spain is quite a big topic, and far more than we would be able to introduce and develop today. So I've just chosen a particular writer. Susana Martín Gijón is she's from a small town in Extremadura. She studied as an attorney. She's worked as a legal advisor in various offices in various private and public organizations. Now she lives and works in Mérida in an agency in the Extremadura regional government. She's a law professional, but in the past few years has been a successful writer, publishing the three novels that I've mentioned here: Más que cuerpos, Desde la eternidad, y Vino y pólvora. Three novels, a trilogy, published within 3 years. That's pretty good work. That's pretty good work. So she's been able to be a successful professional, successful writer as well. I'll talk a little bit about these novels, but I won't reveal a lot of the content because I'd like you to try reading them and see what you think. But I will tell you that in addition to being a woman crime writer from a rural area, Susana's protagonist is a woman police officer. Now, in a patriarchal society like Spain, with very, very traditional organizations, public organizations like the police, women police officers still are a novelty. They still are a new circumstance. So again, we're layering these levels. We're layering these differences that add up to something pretty significant. Susana's character, Annika Kaunda, works and lives in Mérida. She grew up there, but happens to be a refugee from Namibia, who we find through the story that as a child was repatriated or taken out of Namibia, grew up in Extremadura, and now is Spanish. But we understand the ethnic difference. Her blackness is another important marker in a traditional society, a society like Spain. And then finally, Annika's specialty, her academic specialty, is gender theory. So she's a police officer who approaches her work from with a feminist perspective, and then because of that, because of her conscious application of gender theory to police work, she receives the cases that would be relevant for someone with that interest and that expertise. She investigates cases of domestic violence, gender inequality, domestic abuse. I have the list on the next slide, and we'll get to all of it. So it's a very, very fascinating mixture of new elements that probably 30 years ago would not have existed at all. And to the extent that Susana has been a successful writer, she isn't really widely known yet. She's not a bestseller. Hopefully these topics will be of interest and useful to all of you. Just briefly, Más que Cuerpos, the first novel in what Susana calls the saga de Annika. We meet her character. We meet the police officer, and she is she receives a case of partner abuse, a partner murder. A woman is killed allegedly by her male partner. So right away we understand the topic of gender violence and violence against women. This case ties up with another thread that deals with human trafficking, women who are deceived women from former Yugoslavia, Serbia, the Balkans, women who are deceived into coming to Spain to work and then are trapped into rings of prostitution. So that's another one of the gender topics that a police officer like Annika will be investigating. Those threads run through all three novels. I'll just mention that Desde la Eternidad connects with the ancient history, the classical history in Extremadura, historical preservation of Roman culture from the Roman period, what different developers or historians would like to do with the cultural artifacts that are left in that in that part of Spain. One of the murders takes place in the Roman amphitheater in Mérida, so very well connected with the history of the region. And then finally, Vino y Pólvora deals with the winemaking industry in Extremadura, which is fairly unknown. We don't drink a lot of Extremaduran wines, but apparently they exist. There are bodegas, there are vineyards, and there's a murder that involves the winemaking business that also includes abuse of migrant workers who are brought from all over Europe to work in the vineyards in Spain and just lead miserable lives. And so those are some of the topics that you would you would find useful and highlight when you're reading these novels. So what does so I've already mentioned some of the cases that Annika has to consider and investigate. She's a pretty good police officer. She starts out as policía, and in the second or third novel she's an oficial. So she doesn't get to be inspectora, she doesn't get to be comisaria. There are other really competent women police officers who do rise up in their series. I suppose that Annika will get there eventually. Cases of domestic violence and abuse, that's when Annika applies directly her feminist gender theory to her cases. It's a problem for some of the men. It's a problem for some of the men. Some of the more experienced officers, more traditional officers, they don't always get along, and those conflicts between Annika and more conventional officers are always present in these novels. They find a case of fraudulent medication, a factory, pharmaceutical factory in Merida was, well, producing false medicines. The human trafficking and the prostitution, the whole case of más que cuerpos. Endangered children connect with the prostitution, also with the migrant workers who travel in families. Workplace discrimination and abuse. The discrimination that Annika suffers as a woman, as a black woman police officer, is always present, and then the different cases in migrant workers, in the winemaking industry. These are topics that come up, and they're all, for me, these are examples of how crime fiction serves as a vehicle for social analysis, reflecting these circumstances that are in current events, are in the news. The novel gives an author like Susana the opportunity to analyze, denounce, uncover, and also suggest some solutions. The migrant workers I already mentioned. Okay, so just to go back a little bit, I think I could talk about. I'll just recapitulate. There are many other women authors I could describe today, but because of the time and the place, I'll just mention authors like Dolores Redondo from Navarra, Maria Oruña from Cantabria. If I were to go back farther, just to talk about women crime writers, Alicia Jimenez Bartlett from Barcelona is one of the classic leaders in women's crime fiction. The more recent authors that I've mentioned, add the dimension of direct application of gender theory and feminism to their works, and also place these works in areas of Spain that haven't been represented in crime fiction or much popular culture at all. And I think that another step in this topic would be to fill out, do a mapping, do a cartography of crime fiction in Spain, and we could represent that in many different ways. But we would find that the peripheries of Spain are becoming more and more full, geographically, thematically, and certainly with respect to gender. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention and welcome your contact and your questions for any time you'd like to be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the Hola a todas y a todos. Es para mí un placer presentaros al profesor David Knutson de Xavier University, Cincinnati, Ohio. Y está aquí hoy con nosotros para hablarnos sobre una escritora que quizás sea por algunas de vosotros conocida, que se llama Susana Martín Gijón. Entonces nos va a hablar David sobre mujeres y crimen en la obra de Susana Martín Gijón. Okay. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, Nieves. Es un placer estar aquí. Gracias por acompañarme. He repetido muchas veces que esta visita ha sido fenomenal. Me ha encantado conocer a Nieves y otros colegas en la Universidad Xavier I. Espero que no sea mi última visita y que no sea nuestra última colaboración. Voy a resumir brevemente la presentación que me acaban de grabar y estará disponible. Yo soy profesor de estudios hispánicos, soy hispanista esencialmente, y mis investigaciones se concentran en la literatura y cultura contemporáneas en España. La ficción de crímenes, la novela negra, es un vehículo muy útil para examinar circunstancias contemporáneas, casi noticias, problemas sociales que los autores y las autoras pues, se ponen a denunciar, examinar y dentro de las posibilidades ofrecer algunas soluciones. Susana Martín Gijón es una escritora bastante reciente. Están viendo ahí sus novelas publicadas en los últimos 5 años. Susana es un caso interesante porque forma parte de un grupo cada día más grande de mujeres, autoras, que escriben novela negra con un escenario en una zona rural. Susana es de Extremadura y bueno, ahí vive y trabaja y pues se siente muy identificada con su región de origen. Y sus novelas están muy conectadas con la geografía, la historia, las características de Extremadura. 3 novelas en una trilogía que ella llama la saga de Annika o la saga más que cuerpos, novelas cuya protagonista es una mujer que trabaja en la Policía Nacional, llamada Annika Kaunda. Entonces ya empezamos a reducir esas nociones tradicionales de novela negra, de un género escrito por hombres. Bueno, ya tenemos muchos autores en España que escriben novela negra. Luego un protagonista femenino, Annika, que es una mujer que trabaja en una institución muy patriarcal, muy tradicional, y Annika tiene otra característica diferente, que es una refugiada de Namibia, y a lo largo de estas novelas leemos sobre su historia personal y cómo llegó llegó a España como niña. Se crió allí en Extremadura y ahora es policía. Annika es especialista en la teoría de género y como policía aplica esas perspectivas feministas en su trabajo, y entonces como especialista de género le destinan los casos relacionados con esos temas, como la violencia doméstica, la violencia contra mujeres, la prostitución, el tráfico de seres humanos y otros casos por el estilo. No hay tiempo para considerar todos los detalles de sus novelas ahora. Simplemente las recomiendo como buenos ejemplos de novela criminal contemporánea de España. buenos ejemplos de novela negra escrita por una mujer y también buenos ejemplos de novela negra rural de España. Y con eso creo que resumo bastante de lo que he hablado antes, y si hay alguna pregunta o duda, por favor contactar conmigo. Será un placer. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, David. Bueno, comentaros que podéis contactar con David a través de email, que os podemos pasar desde el instituto, y él tiene Twitter, con lo cual cualquier comentario o información que queráis se lo podéis enviar. Muchísimas gracias, nos vemos en el foro. Hasta pronto.
Gracias, adiós.